Welcome to the regular LAFCo meeting. This is Tuesday, March 2nd, 2023. It's 9 a.m. by my clock, a little slow by Orville time, but first, please join me in salute the flag of our nation. Ready, salute, pledge. I, United States of America, and to the republic please call the roll.
Commissioner Boland,
Here.
Commissioner Johnson,
Here.
Commissioner Kimmelshoe, Chair Connolly,
Here.
Commissioner McGreehan,
Here.
Commissioner Sharman, Commissioner Betts,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Rust, alternate Commissioner Bradley,
Here.
alternate Commissioner Ritter. Here. Thank you.
Okay, first up is our consent agenda. Would any member up here like to pull something from the consent agenda? Are there any electronic? Anybody out there like to pull a consent agenda? I'll entertain a motion on the consent agenda.
I'll motion to approve.
Second. All those in favor? Oh, do we have to call the roll? Or can I just do voice vote? Call the roll.
Commissioner Ritter. Aye. Commissioner Boland,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Chair Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Betts,
Aye.
Commissioner McGreehan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, we're going to notice public hearing, 3.1, dissolution drainage district number 2.
All right. Good morning, commissioners. This is a proposal to dissolve drainage district number 2. The proposal was initiated by the board of directors at its November 2nd, 2022 meeting. The district is located south and west of the unincorporated community of Nelson in Western Butte County. It involves 51 parcels and serves an area of approximately 7,500 acres. The district was formed in 1920 for the purpose of making improvements to an 8-mile stretch of Little Dry Creek, which flows through the district boundaries. And they also maintain a lateral canal that connects Little Dry Creek to Butte Creek. All of the district, it lies within the boundaries of Butte Creek Drainage District, which is a much larger district. It's better funded, and it also is empowered to provide the same services. This proposal to dissolve the district is consistent with LAFCo policies that say that a district can be dissolved when it's determined that the services are no longer needed or could be provided by another district more efficiently. And it's also consistent with the sphere of influence and a municipal service review plan for drainage district service providers that was approved by the commission in June of 2018. That MSR found that because of operational and service redundancies, that the constituents within Drainage District 2 were essentially paying twice for a service provided by DD2 and by Butte Creek Drainage District. So because of that, the MSR determined that there should be a reorganization and that DD2 should be dissolved. Butte Creek Drainage District would be named the successor agency to wind up the affairs of the district. So today we're asking that you adopt resolution 15-2223, approving the dissolution of the district, finding that the project is exempt from the Environmental Quality Act pursuant to section 15320, and waive protest proceedings pursuant to code section 57077.1. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
Questions or comments by commissioners?
One is the Butte Creek Drainage District. They want to do this. Don't have a problem with taking
Yes.
over the duties of.
Yeah, all managerial services for DD2 and Butte Creek Drainage District are provided by Western Canal's district manager. And so essentially no services will change out there because they're already being managed by Western Canal and provided by Butte Creek Drainage District.
I just want to add, this is consistent with state law, with LAFCO law regarding getting rid of unneeded agencies.
That's
So
right.
this-
And the
This
district
is a very
board,
good thing.
the district board voted unanimously to dissolve the district.
Any electronic comment on this?
No.
Is there any public comment on this issue? I'll close public comment. Bring it wishes of the board. If you do have public comment, please fill out a card. It'll make it go much quicker. Wishes of the board.
I'll move approval.
Second,
Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Commissioner Ritter,
Aye.
Commissioner Bolin,
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Yes.
Chair Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Betts,
aye.
Commissioner McGreehan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is the Tuscan district formation. I'm going to recuse myself. Would you please take over, Mr. Betts?
I will.
Mr. Chair, if we might, before you recuse yourself from this, we're having some technical difficulties with the attorney online. I'm going to ask that you bump this item down to the agenda and continue on the agenda while we try to resolve it.
Okay.
Thank
I'll
you.
recuse myself later. All right. We have nothing removed from consent agenda. We'll move on to 4.2. South Feather Water and Power Agency Foothill Boulevard Annexation number 8. This is staff report.
Sure, thank you. So this is a annexation proposal for the South Feather and Water Power Agency to annex a single 7.42 acre parcel into the district for the purpose of providing domestic water to the site. The annexation would allow the property to reduce its dependency on pumped water via the domestic well and potentially develop the site with further residential uses. The project is consistent with LAFCo policy. And today we are asking that the commission would adopt resolution 192223, finding that the project is exempt from environmental review and approving the annexation into the South Feather and Water and Power Agency.
Okay, questions or comments by commissioners? Pretty straightforward. Electronic comment?
No.
Public comment. So the annexation, we'll close public comment. Wishes of the board.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve as recommended by staff.
Second.
I'm gonna tell you commissioners, somebody makes a motion, you second right away. All right,
I
please-
tried.
Please call the roll.
Commissioner Ritter. Aye. Commissioner Bolin.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson.
Yes.
Chair Connolly,
Aye.
Commissioner Betts,
Aye.
Commissioner McGreehan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, I passed unanimously. Next up is public comment. Willing to listen to you for 3 minutes on anything that's on your mind. If it's not agendized, we cannot take action. Is there any wish for public comment? Okay, any electronic public comment?
No, not for,
Oh, thank you. I will close the public comment. We're going to move on. Reports and communications. That'll be executive officers report. And first off, is that lawyer online yet? Okay.
Through these items, we did have a city selection committee meeting. It was held on February 6th. There was some confusion about who was selected. It was received back to us from the county clerk. I think we have it resolved, but before I make any announcements for that position, I would like to have a conversation with the county clerk first to ensure that I got my information correct. So we will have to go without a city alternate for a little while longer, hopefully not long. Special District Enterprise Commissioner Sharman's term is up in May. We are currently asking for nominations, and that actually closes tomorrow. And so I know right now I can tell you we have 2 nominations for certain, so we will be having an election moving forward. We expect to have the annual audit in front of you next month. Going down to projects, general notes, I just want to highlight a few things real quick. There's the county library issue that I spoke briefly about at our last meeting. The board did direct its staff to further explore those options. I will stay involved and cooperate with the county staff as they move forward, should any of those options include a LAFCo function. I don't expect that anytime soon. Paradise Sewer Project, the town council just on February 14th approved their section of the agreement that they signed with the city of Chico, and then city of Chico unanimously approved the intermunicipal agreement at their meeting on February 21st. So where that leaves the city now is city of Chico's responsibility to submit the application to LAFCo for the extension of services. And we expect that probably sometime in April or sooner, perhaps, for your consideration. I don't have any other updated information really to provide that, as you can see from your thing, there's nothing new, but I'm not happy to answer any other. Oh, I want to follow up with Mr. McGrean. Last hearing, he had asked about the Tuscan Ridge project, and I had indicated it. My understanding, it was incomplete. Since then, I have had conversations with the proponent of that project. They are still working apparently through the administrative draft EIR. They're developing a scope of work now. They want to talk to LAFCo first. I understand there's some differences of opinion perhaps between the proponent and the county staff right now on how to proceed. So I expect to meet with them soon. It's not a great answer, Mr. McGrain, but it's more information than I had last time. It's been a tough project to track. And that is all I have. Unless anybody has any questions on any of these items.
What about state LAFCO issues?
State LAFCO issues. We will continue to work on two bills. One is our indemnification bill, which we're looking for a author on, and the other bill deals with extension of services, which again, we're looking for authors for both of those bills. I think unless Bill, you want to add anything to that from
I think the indemnification is allowed by cities, counties, and special districts, but because of a language interpretation by the courts, imagine that, we are not allowed to do it without voluntarily asking for it. So we're looking for somebody to carry a bill to change that so that we, LAFCO, can be indemnified, understanding that if we are not, those costs will be passed on to special districts in the city or county if we fail. So the best thing to say is that special districts came on board as of late and are supportive of it. So that was a real change. We tried to do it the very last day, maybe find a gut and amend bill or something, and we failed at that. But if anybody has any ideas of a legislator that we could approach, we'd appreciate having that knowledge and proceed with that. It's important.
Well said.
Okay, next up, administration. Oh, any questions or comments by commissioners? Any public comment on that?
No.
Okay. Next up, administration.
There is nothing more to add on that.
Okay. So where's our lawyer? Still snowed in?
I wonder, Mr. Connolly, could we please take a 5-minute break while we think we have him on the phone?
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, the attorney, the LAFCO attorney lives in Grass Valley, and he's snowed in behind multiple down trees and miles from a paved road, a plowed road, I should say. So, and he's having difficulty this morning with his internet, but I think we have it solved. So
Maybe you can call an alternate. Well, we're gonna recess till 20 after by that clock.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there.
yes, Scott, we can hear you.
I just did a recess. I changed my mind.
Okay. Okay, I'm here by audio only. I'm sorry, but I could not get the Zoom to work.
Are we legal with that?
Yes.
I'm gonna recuse myself. Up next up. There you go. Do you have a pen or anything?
No, I got plenty.
Slideshow.
I do want you to have it.
Oh, you want my gavel? You might need it.
Thank you. I've never been a chair before, so please excuse any procedural errors. We'll try to get by those. The item that we're looking at today now is a notice public hearing as agenda item 3.2. It's project number 21-06, formation of Tuscan Water District. Today, this hearing is only to correct procedural concerns with conducting authority for LAFCO, procedures related to the election process. Number 2 is to harmonize the condition for funding with Proposition 218 and in accordance with the state constitution. The agenda text is the commission is requested to consider and adopt an amended resolution for the formation of the Tuscan Water District that is intended to address procedural issues regarding election processes and funding mechanisms. The action today is consider the staff report and approve resolution number 18/2022/23. I want to note what today's action is not. It is not a reevaluation of the original project approval. It is not a change to any boundaries or affected parcels. It is not a change to any authorized powers or functions. And last, it is not a change to any terms and conditions related to the functioning of the district. I do want to note that we received a letter yesterday via email from Mr. James McCabe dated March 1st. I just want to acknowledge that the commission did receive that letter with all the attachments. Staff?
Use the microphone, yeah.
I'll move over here for my microphone. Yes.
Officer of LAFCo. I'm going to try to coordinate this with Mr. Brown on the phone, and we have a slideshow, and I'm going to do the lead into this process, and then I'll turn it over to Scott to walk through the formalities of the legal questions that were answered. So please pay attention, Mr. Brown. Agenda 3.2
I am
is
paid attention.
these are proposed amendments to the Tuscan Water District formation, adopting resolution that we have to proceed with today. So in summary, the commission is requested to consider and adopt an amended resolution for the formation of the Tuscan Water District. The amendments are intended to address procedural conducting authority proceedings raised in a December 7th, 2022 letter from Mr. James McCabe and other comment letters we have received. This hearing is not, and I emphasize, as Mr. Betts pointed out, this is not a new consideration of the proposal. We are not talking about changes to the powers, to the functions, to the requirement for funding. These are all issues that deal with the conducting authority proceedings, which starts with the protest proceeding, moves through the election process, and then the outcome of the election. So there have been irregularities, and that's what this is about today. It's not about going back through the project. Next slide, please. As I said, there's no changes to the boundaries. The current boundary, as you see up there on the screen, remains the same. I'm just going to run through a background real quick. It's all in the staff report, so I will do this succinctly. February 3rd, we adopted the resolution. So almost a year ago, this commission approved the formation of the district subject to a protest proceeding and an election. That was a unanimous vote of the commission at that time, based on the factors that were involved and in your presentation. On April 5th, we conducted a protest proceeding in accordance with the law and found that there was insufficient protest to terminate the proceedings. Following up with that, on April 7th, we moved on to asking the supervisors to direct the county elections office to conduct the necessary election. On June 6th, this commission authorized an impartial analysis to be submitted along with that action. On September 16th, we did receive a letter from Mr. James McCabe about Butte County Clerk Recorder objecting to the proceeding. Aqua Alliance also provided a similar letter. Next slide. Shortly thereafter, on September 27th, the county elections official in a news release determined that the election could no longer occur because of some irregularities, and it would be renoticed and scheduled for a future date. On November 29th of this past year, LAFCo was requested by the county to submit a new request, for which I did. That request was also challenged by Mr. McCabe in his letter of December 7th and in the originating resolution. January 2nd, we received a letter from County Council requesting that we review Mr. McCabe's letter and adopt, if appropriate, a revised TWD formation resolution to submit to the county that addresses the issues raised. So the letter from the County Council's office on behalf of the county was the reason we are now back at this hearing. That was our initiative to come back to you for some clarification and amendments based on what the County Council and the Butte County Board of Supervisors have requested. Next slide, please. So now we're going to start the part about each of the individual objections. And Mr. Brown, if you are prepared, you can proceed with these items as you want to go through them. And they're in the order that is in your staff report, staff memo in front of it. So he will proceed there. Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, the first issue, and I assume this is the next slide, analysis McCabe, September 16th, 2022. And basically what the memo does is it goes point by point through McCabe's objections and responds to each of those objections. His first objection is the failure of the county to provide a notice of election as required by Government Code 57130. Our response and our recommended change in the resolution is that it specifically directs the Board of Supervisors.
Oh, no.
Mila,
So that should address that concern.
Scott, you cut out there
Yeah.
for a minute. We lost a few words of what you said.
Okay. Yeah, part of the problem is that when there's any noise on your end, it switches to your end.
We just
But
make sure.
what I was saying is that can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Scott, we can hear you.
Oh, okay. The government code section requires a special notice of election, and the elections department missed that requirement, and therefore the new resolution does specific. This responds to Mr. McCabe's objection on that point. Any questions on this?
Yeah,
If not, let's move on to the next.
no,
yes.
let's not move on.
I'm sorry, I couldn't catch everything you said.
What I said was your communication to us blacked out for a few minutes, so we're not hearing everything you're saying. And I have asked everybody to turn their microphones off while you're speaking. So your
Okay.
first question was 57-130, and the objection was the notice, and the recommendation on the part of our council and staff is that we will specifically require, and if you're looking at that slide, it's underlined in dark black right there, particularly Government Code 57-130. So on that first objection, we've corrected that objection by specifically directing them to follow that government code. So
Mhm.
Scott, with that, I think we can
Thanks.
go on to the next slide.
Yeah. I'm sorry if I'm cutting out. I don't know why. There's no noise
our
on my
best.
end other than me. The next slide relates to McCabe's objection that staff is not authorized to call for an election by the Board of Supervisors. We disagree with this. We think that the resolution specifically authorized staff to do so, but it really is moot because we're going to send this resolution to the Board of Supervisors, which calls for an election. So that concern is addressed.
Next slide.
Any questions?
Please proceed.
Okay, if not, next slide. Yeah, McCabe insisted that there be a new resolution to initiate the election process under Government Code 57,000 E1. We are proposing a new amended resolution with this resolution, so that issue is addressed. Next slide. Now, this one was a bit of a greater challenge. Mr. McCabe argues that the formation vote must be based on assessed value, not on acreage. We had originally, in our original resolution, proposed based on acreage because that was the procedure being used by other LAFCos. And there's an ambiguity in the water code between two sections that requires interpretation. The analysis gives my consideration of that issue, and my conclusion is that we do need to follow the assessed value rather than acreage as the basis for the weighting the votes in the election. Includes a change in the way in which the votes shall be calculated based on assessed valuation as determined by the county assessment roll. Any questions on that?
So to summarize just real quickly for everyone, that we originally had gone down the route of a 1 acre per 1 vote formula, which Mr. Brown expressed was what was used around the state by almost every other formation. However, we do agree that 1 acre per $1 of assessed land, or 1 vote for $1 of assessed land value, is the more appropriate way to move forward. And so what you see in black at the bottom of that slide in dark letters are the areas where we've actually inserted that language to be clearly both in the ballot language and in the conditions, where it now specifically indicates that landowners will have 1 vote for each dollar's worth of land. So it's really as simple as that. Is there any questions on that item?
I have a question if I may. So since it's going from an acre as the measure to assess land value, does that now include the assessed land, all of the assessed land value in this district? So including the areas inside Chico?
Yes, ma'am. It'll be all affected parcels based on the land value for those parcels, and they will all have the right to vote based on those land values.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, we'll move on to the next slide, number 4, Scott.
Yes, this one was an objection by Mr. McCabe that the resolution failed to state the questions to be presented to the voters as required by 57115D. The amended resolution does include explicit ballot measure language to be submitted to the voters. And it reflects the fact that the approval will be based on assessed value.
So we can go to the next slide, please. Continue, Scott.
The next objection by McCabe was that the code requires that we state explicitly the vote required for approval of the measures that will be presented to the voters for the formation of the district. Again, the amended resolution now precisely defines the voters in the formation election and the amount of vote required for approval of the measures. So this objection, again, has been satisfied with the changes to the amended resolution.
Are there any questions? We'll move on to the next slide, please.
Mr. McCabe and Aqua Alliance also objected to the proposed partial charge as a method of funding the district. They argued that it violated Proposition 218. They argued that only a special tax approved by 2/3 a vote of the registered voters would authorize such a revenue measure. As we've indicated, and we may want to go on to the second slide, the next slide, we have changed the proposed funding mechanism from requiring an explicit partial charge to giving the district 1 year in which to approve a revenue measure as they determine in compliance with the law to fund the necessary operation of the district. So instead of explicitly stating a funding mechanism in our resolution, we are leaving that to the district to determine to do, presumably in accordance with the requirements of law for such funding mechanism.
What is essential to take away from this particular function is, and I want to drive this home, this still requires them to come up with the same amount of revenue that we had indicated in their fiscal analysis that they would be required to fund and function in their first year and third year of operation. So we, at that fiscal analysis, pointed out the 445. The distinction we're making here is how they get to the 445 is going to be the district's process to do, but they're not going to be relieved in any way, shape, or form from funding that amount of money for the district. And as you see in the rest of that item number 12, this will be dissolved if they are unable to reach that. So what we're really doing is, in this process, we're allowing the formation to occur first, giving them the constitutional authority then to run that 218 process or other process that they see fit, as long as it equals $445,000 a year. And they have 1 year to get that accomplished. And if they fail to do that, no different than what we discussed in the original resolution, is they will be dissolved at the end of that 1 year, unless they come back to us and ask for an extension for some reason. But so I just want to be clear that we are not changing the funding requirement, nor are we changing the requirement that they dissolve should they not be able to be funded. So there's no fundamental difference here other than the timing of when those two things occur. Is there any questions? Yes, sir.
I can get them. I have two questions. First and foremost, the 1 year is measured from the date of the election results.
The 1 year is measured from the date we file their certificate of completion,
Data certificate.
which
of
will
completion.
follow the election results.
That comes after the election.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then the second question is, within that 1 year period, the determination of the authorized revenue mechanism is to be done by that board for that
Correct.
district? The
Yes, sir.
9-member board?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
I have a follow-up question on that. So you can tell I'm the new one here. So the 9-member board is going to determine what the legally authorized revenue mechanism is. And that does that go out to a vote of the people in the district, or is that, how does that happen?
So, and this is, there's a lot of ways potentially that funding mechanisms can go, but in this particular case, what's important to answer your question is the 9-member board, once elected, will have to make a determination as to how they're going to arrive at $445,000 a year in order to implement the procedures and functions and services we've already approved. There are different ways to perhaps get to that number, but it's going to be their choice as the governing body at that time to decide which way they want to go. Now, if they go almost every way they're going to go, short of some sort of external grant funding, which magically appears, they're going to have to go back to their constituents and they're going to have a vote of that revenue measure. I can't tell you the exact way that's going to occur because it depends on the measure they choose. But rest assured that any revenue measure that's enacted by the district or proposed must be supported by the landowner voters who must pay it.
And is that an election that takes place just within this district, or would this be something that would actually be on the ballot? You know, just like how we vote for our representatives in a specific area, would this show up on a ballot only in that area?
The most likely outcome, the district will ask for a mailed ballot election. It'll get mailed to all the landowners as shown on the assessment roll just within the district, because those are the ones that are affected and will be potentially paying that cost. So it's just within the district.
Yes, the most likely funding mechanism is a special assessment. If they adopt a special assessment in accordance with the Proposition 218 special assessment procedures, the vote will be only amongst those properties actually assessed and will be based on property value in the amount of the assessment per property, which will weight the vote.
Is that a sufficient reply, Ms. Ritter?
Sort of, it kind of gets me there. I'm just curious, you know, how, I mean, I know that I get all kinds of different things in the mail and I don't necessarily look at them. And so if we are increasing this based on, you know, everyone who's within the district, I'm not sure what the return rate would be based on a mail ballot, as opposed to if this was actually the way that we do tax assessments on a
Just
county ballot.
perhaps for some clarification that you might be more familiar with. So the county CSAs at time to time have to raise their assessments. You have to go through a 218 process. Each of those landowners is provided a mailed ballot. County gets that back. It's simply whoever the simple majority is. to
Right.
make
And
it
that's
pass.
that's my concern is we get very few people objecting to a lighting district or a CSA because people don't open their mail.
Right. Well, we can't make civics be a course in our school, Yale. So,
I have
Scott?
I have one additional follow-up question, if I may.
yes, sir.
And this is just for my education perhaps, but correct me if I'm wrong on my understanding, but assuming that the certificate of completion is filed, the election takes place, the election is certified as resultant. There's a new board of directors of 9 members, and then there's a year underway for that district board to come up with a mechanism for funding and hopefully go to the constituents and have a vote and so forth. My concern is, how does that district operate during that 1-year period? And do they have legal counsel? And what's my assurance that the legal counsel they use is a neutral party that has no interaction with any of those board members?
Well, for that,
Well-
that's a, go ahead, Scott, if you want to answer it.
Yeah, first, the board will engage an attorney as it's authorized in any district. And that attorney will work for the board. It will necessarily, that's the attorney's client. Now, the district may have to seek donations from proponents to keep operating so it can pay its attorney and other operational expenses until such time as the revenue measure is adopted. There's nothing that is illegal about giving money to a public agency. So, I mean, I presume that's likely to be the course that they will take. But the attorney will always be working for the board of directors, not for any source of funding.
Is it? Fair enough. No, and it's a very common practice on formations that new board obviously has to have a period for which it's to meet, to engage an engineer and attorney, prepare the ballot measure, make those decisions. And at that point, they have to have either they volunteer their time, which often happens in that first year, the actual directors, or they engage in some contract staff to help, and they take donations or loans up at that point to get to there. Obviously, the onus is on them to make this happen. It's not on the commission. It's not on the county. It's solely on the newly formed district to make this happen. And they certainly know the seriousness of it, as if they don't raise the money, then they are dissolved. So it's not a perfect process, but it is the one the legislature gave us.
And do those costs then have to be recovered? I know this is very hard to hear. Do those costs then have to be recovered after the fact? So if whatever amount of money is needed to operate during that year, as my colleague was asking, do those costs then get passed on to the individuals in the district, or is that a separate cost?
It is not without possibility that the district could accept that based on a repayment process with the effectiveness of that vote for the new funding. But if the funding does not originate, then those folks who made those arrangements will have no source of return for those funds. All right. Any other questions on that funding mechanism change? Okay, we'll move on to slide number, it's 5, Scott, funding mechanisms continued. Do you want to cover that one?
Well, I think we've discussed all of the funding mechanisms. I don't see anything new in that particular slide that we haven't discussed, unless you see something.
No, it's really just another section of our resolution that clarifies that the district will be dissolved if it is unable to fund itself. I just want to make it clear throughout this process that funding is still required, and if funding is not reached, the district gets dissolved. These are the fundamental tenets we've had going back a year, and they're not changing. This is just a different process by which to get there that is legally compliant with the various laws at play that we did not have the opportunity to fully understand prior to this. So I think Scott's right that. So we can move on to the next slide, which is a CEQA slide.
Yes, under CEQA, we have listed a number of grounds in which we believe fully justify exemption at this time. One of the primary ones being that environmental review is premature at this time because we don't know what, if anything, the district is likely to do. And therefore, how can we analyze the potential environmental effects of something we can only speculate as to? An additional ground that's added in the amended resolution is under categorical exemption 15.320, because in this case, the VINA Sustainable Groundwater Agency is already exercising the powers within the area of this proposed district that are now being proposed to be assumed by the new district. Therefore, all we're doing is shifting powers from one public agency to another, which justifies use of the categorical exemption of 15.320, because there's no environmental impact from simply shifting power from one agency to another. So for all of these reasons set forth in the resolution, we believe that it is fairly clear that this is just not the time to do environmental review of this formation.
So, and for clarification, when Scott referred to those others, there are 9 separate findings for environmental review that are in the resolution, 2 of which have been added this time around, and the preceding 7, which were adopted and implemented at our first resolution approval. So I don't want you to make it feel like this is something new, as it's necessarily needed. It was yet another exemption that would apply. So now you have 9 potential ways to comply with CEQA through those exemptions. So again, this is not fundamentally changing the project in any way. The constructs of the project did not change. The CEQA review did not have to change. There was no change to the project description that would require a CEQA, a separate review. So those same findings will stay in this new adopting proposed resolution 18. So we can go to the next slide, which is, I'll take this one, Scott, which is the alternatives for commission review. Very common, what you usually see. So we have, you can approve amended resolution today. You could deny the request without prejudice today. And if for any reason you felt you needed additional information that could not have been provided today, then you have the opportunity to continue this item to a future date. Staff is recommending that you consider the staff memorandum with attachments, which there are many, and consider any public testimony you will hear today, and then use your discretion to amend the previously approved resolution. And then I provided a motion, should somebody wish to take an action, is to approve the statutory exemptions and the environmental determinations. And then the second one is to approve the amendments in the identified draft resolution 18, amending resolution 11, conditionally approving the formation. So that's the conclusion of our presentation. I recognize this is somewhat difficult to follow. For those of us who've been living it for a year or more, or 2 or 5, it's not as difficult to follow. But the reality is what we're doing today, regardless of the legal terminology and the various things we have to do, what we're really doing is just trying to go back to a process there were some irregularities in, alter our resolution so that procedurally we can proceed in compliance with the law with absolutely not affecting any of our original decision as to the merits of the original proposal. We are simply, again, here today, you are today, to only look at the items about the amendments to change this procedural processes dealing with the protest proceeding, which we will go back and have another, as well as the election processes that Mr. Brown walked through. I want to add too that we, in process of developing this memo, we did this in close coordination with County Counsel's office, who reviewed the memo, and we also worked in close coordination with the proponent's attorney, So there was unanimous agreement from the attorneys involved, LAFCo attorney, county attorney, and the proponent's attorney, that these fixes were not only acceptable, but required and necessary to remove those issues moving forward. And I will add that we made an abundance of effort where we could to just redo certain issues. Even though we strongly disagreed, we felt Mr. McCabe made a legitimate, responsible response to that, and felt that in some cases it was better to just make the change and proceed forward. So having said that, it's now any questions for me or for Scott, and if there are none, then it would be appropriate to ask for public comments.
Well, I understand that Mr. McCabe submitted something at the last hour. Is staff or legal counsel prepared to advise the commission on that input that we received? I acknowledge we got a hard copy of it, and we had an email copy too. We've read that, but is there anything we're sharing verbally this morning relative to that?
Mr. Brown, would you like to comment on the letter received dated March 1st that was circulated yesterday?
Yes, basically the letter rehashes arguments he'd previously made, specifically the argument that a landowner voter district is unconstitutional. This is contrary to the clear precedent in the law that has found such landowner voter districts constitutional, but he's continuing to make that that demand. So, Steve, I don't have that letter right in front of me. If there are other points, maybe you can address them while I
certainly
try
can.
and pull it up.
So as Mr. Brown pointed out, the original complaint about it being unconstitutional clearly is at odds with the United States Supreme Court ruling, and we fully discussed that at our first hearing, and that's not up for discussion today. That's decided law. The application submitted by the proponents to LAFCo, he claims the application was insufficient or deficient. Again, we had that discussion back February of last year. It was clearly determined that there was a sufficient application. There was no alterations or miscommunications there. It's a non-issue as far as staff is concerned. The last item on here relates to the money that was spent to get them to this point. The reality is it's not the agency's job to monitor where the money comes from an application. We have an application, we have 3 proponents, they pay their bills. Where that money comes from is not the concern of ours. I'm not saying it may not matter to some people, but in the process that we look at, we don't have the luxury of trying to decide whether an application is good or bad based on where the funding is coming from for the application. Your job is to look at the application. We did so. Any other concerns about the funding of this group or how they came is not a concern of the commission. So I appreciate that it's a concern to this gentleman, but that's not a concern for the public agency who's looking at the project, as long as the bills get paid. So that's pretty much it. And everything else in the attachments was stuff you've already seen, and it's not up for agenda discussion today. Again, this is mostly rehashing what happened a year ago, and we're here today asking you for some very specific changes to deal with the procedures moving forward with an election. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Scott?
No, I think we've covered it, other than if there are any questions from the commissioners and or from the public.
Understood. So, Mr. Betts, if there's no more questions of staff, feel free to.
We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Were there any speaker cards? And our speakers limited to 3 minutes?
Yes, sir.
The first card I have is from Jeffrey Ober. Apologize if I got the name wrong.
I'm not at my best in the morning, so I'm going to pretty much read from a letter I prepared, which I take it I should hand to the clerk at this point, or microphone.
I think
It's on. Okay. Hi, Tammy. questions of a legal nature. I'm a homeowner within the boundaries of the district. I think have a right to know how my extra property taxes will be used if there's a new assessment. And then I have a couple of fine points that I've noticed with my prior career as a journalist. I can burrow into documents and find things, and I'm increasingly finding things. Section 5.2.8 of the Butte LAFCo Operations Manual, page 37. I'll read you this item that troubles me. Fiscal solvency, which seems to come up a lot this morning. LAFCo will prepare or cause to be prepared a fiscal analysis for the proposed district, which projects services to be provided, costs to service recipients, and revenue expenses for a period of at least 5 years. LAFCo will not approve an application for district formation unless the fiscal analysis demonstrates the district can provide the needed services and remain fiscally solvent. Now, if the financing element, blah, 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 this seems to be a bit of a speed bump that has come up earlier this morning about, we're not really sure what we're getting into. And I presume the $10 per acre per month will go up from there. Could I move on to my second point, or do you want to
Sure,
address
please.
that? Mr.
Please.
Betts? Oh, okay. The second thing I noticed was in the application itself. We're now separating out the approval from the assessment in this amended resolution, as I understand it. But from the Butte Local Agency Formation Commission Tuscan Water District application, June 9th, 2021, I'm going to read you the text. Notwithstanding California Water District Law, Government Code, or California Article 13D, landowners, as a condition of formation, A, consent to a board of directors levying assessments on district lands, B, approve initial assessments not to exceed $10 per acre, and C, authorize Butte County to collect such assessments. I'm just wondering if we're putting the cart before the horse to try and get a voter approval of the district without the assessment being part of it. And it also traces back into the question of what is the fiscal long-term view of how the district will work out. And it will impact me personally and my neighbors. And we're beginning to pay close attention to this. And the much smaller point I have is I'd like to know if we're moving to a vote based on assessed land value. There are multiple assessed land values for many parcels, and many agricultural parcels are enjoying a reduced land assessment under the Williamson Act, which I understand was to preserve the agricultural character of the land, which I am very much in favor of, by the way, and of all attempts and good intentions to ease the pressure on the growers under the pressures they're under, I support.
3 minutes are. Yeah, Mr. Lucas, did you want to address any of these comments?
Yeah, I mean, I think we went through that in our presentation. The reason to separate the revenue measure from the vote is as it turns out, is that the mechanism that we had originally planned, where it was going to be on the same ballot, that just functionally could not occur given Propositions 218 requirements. It's something we had hoped we would be able to put together sufficiently, but it was not. So we're separating them out. Again, the difference doesn't change. It's $445,000 must be raised. It has to be consistent with that fiscal plan that we've already adopted, which was also embedded in this new resolution, which was approved back in February. And if it fails to be approved, then the district is dissolved. I'm not sure if I can answer it any other way.
Is that plan that you're referencing, the 400 and some thousand that they have to raise? The plan doesn't have to talk about how, like, when I think about a financial plan, right, I usually think about this is how much money is going to be raised, and this is how it's going to be raised, and this is why we can feel confident moving forward. So the plan is not actually a plan, it's just a number, and that's what we're talking about as the plan.
So And I appreciate that you did not have the luxury of sitting through all the
Yeah, I
prior
don't
hearings.
apologize. I
No,
just,
not
you know,
not your
for-
fault.
For all the newbies out there like me.
Absolutely.
You know,
So what we did in the initial approval was there was a fiscal analysis that was provided, which is essentially a budget that goes out 3 years and demonstrates what it is they're going to need in order to succeed. So it lists different categories of employees, the staff, legal counsel, monies for all of that. Anyhow, this budget, which was the quote unquote fiscal analysis, it came up with a number that in that first year, they would need to generate $445,000 and some change in order to meet that that proposed budget. This $10 per acre was the initial way of saying, how can we arrive at funding this budget? It's now 97,000. I can't remember the number, 97,000 acres, let's just say. At $10 an acre, that's $970,000. That's clearly twice what they needed. The idea of the $10 up to $10 an acre was to give that board as much flexibility as possible. It could have been 10, it could have been 5, it could have been 1. The reality is it really needs to be around, if it was on acres, it would have been on 5. But now we're doing away with the acres altogether. We're going to switch to assessed land value. So that changes that dynamic. It does not change, though, the $445,000 number that they have to reach to have sufficient funds to operate in that first year based on that analysis.
okay. So just so I'm clear, it doesn't have to say how they get there. It just has to.
You know,
come up
it's
with the
really
number.
not the commission's place to tell another agency how it is they are to be funded.
Mhm.
It is very much our place to make sure that there's funding in place and they tell us that what that number is.
And then what the gentleman who just spoke, Mr. he quoted something from our LAFCo manual. I don't know that I've actually read that particular manual. Can you respond to the concern he expressed?
If you just give me a second. So he's talking about the fiscal analysis, and that's what was prepared in the original staff reports that came back in December of 21 and February of 22. And in that, you'll see a budget that extrapolates out from 1, 3, and 5 years of potential costs. So that's what this policy he speaks of is about, is we want to ensure that we have an idea of where it's going to go and do they have a plan to get there. In this particular case, unlike a district that's already formed, they can't do this in advance. There's just no way to do it. A county can run a CSA 218 process in advance of even requesting to initiate the formation because you are the board and you're still authorized to do it. In this case, they don't become an authorized board until they get formed, and then they have that first year to figure out their financing mechanism. Is that
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Okay, the next speaker is Claudia Rollins.
I'm not so wonderfully prepared as my colleague. But I sort of just want to cut to the chase. So is it true that we will need to vote without knowing any environmental consequence and without knowing how much it'll cost? That's where we are, right?
You
Mr.
want me
Lucas,
to answer that?
please.
So you are going to know the cost. It's $445,000 a year is what their projected first year's cost is. And you will be voting on the formation. And then you will also have an opportunity to vote on that funding measure if you are in the affected territory. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where we are.
Okay.
Is that okay? What was the other one? Oh, environmental consequences, as I'm sorry, just as we I discussed earlier and Scott did, is that this has got 9 different exemptions that qualify under CEQA. So the reality is at this point, there are no projects proposed. We can't even but speculate what they might be because they are going to coordinate with the Vina GSA, the Rock Creek GSA, and the Butte Basin GSA. And once they go through that process of determining what is even feasible for this district to do and undertake in support of those GSAs and their plans, then they might come up with a particular project. And at that point, that project will have to go under full environmental review. But we don't have those now, and it's entirely too speculative to determine what those would be to prepare an environmental analysis.
So then can I
Through the chair, please. If you could come to the podium.
So then I would like to ask a follow-up question, which is, how did you do the budget? If we don't know what the projects are, how do we know that that would cost 445,000?
So would you like me to answer that, Mr. Betts?
Please.
The budget was prepared in the first 5 years, 1, 3, and 5, to determine organizational and administrative capacity. You don't just form a district and then you immediately start to do a project. These folks are going to have to get up and running, and they're going to have to adopt bylaws. There's a number of things that the board is going to have to do that are internal, I would call organizational administrative capacities that they're going to build. And for that, they indicated in their budget who the staff people would be and what the cost estimates would be for hiring those people to develop those initial organizational and administrative documents. That is what the first year's budget is to address. So future budgets, should they include projects, will look different because projects may now be included. Other functions may now be included, but initially their first year is not going to be defining budgets. Their first year is going to be spent doing a lot of legwork that frankly, this commission is required of them through conditions to go seek cooperative relationships with the GSAs, to develop staffing capability and so forth. So this is sort of the heavy lifting just to get them ready to function and then start looking at projects and integrating with the various GSAs in their proposals. Does that make sense? So this is really just, a startup point now. It's not like they're going to just hit the ground running and start with projects.
Okay.
They have to build a capacity to do that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker card I have is for Emily Alma.
Yes, thank you. I am a landowner within the district who was not invited to join, nor could I have afforded to join. So I just want to identify my role with this, and I'm very concerned about the establishment of the Tuscan Water District. I have several different comments. I hope I can get through them all. The first is a reminder from Scott Brown's memo that he sent out, that a statement that there was insufficient protest to terminate the formation application on April 5th. And that insufficient protest, which I was part of, included the factors that led to the necessity to cancel the election. So I want to remind you of that as you consider whether to put this on, to move it forward, that there's already kind of an embarrassment for the clerk recorder of Butte County and LAFCo. The next thing I want to mention is an attachment A, section 6 of Scott Brown's memo, which reads that the sphere shall be reduced to zero sphere and the district dissolved if the district does not successfully enact a revenue measure for the district in accordance with condition 12 below within 1 year from the date of recording, which has been repeated numerous times that they have 1 year to complete the funding process. However, the last sentence in section 6 says the executive officer may extend this 1-year deadline based on good cause demonstrated by the district. That's a very vague statement, good cause. And to me, it sounds like a get out of jail free card. That if they're not held to that standard, what are those conditions that would be good cause? And of course, it means they are trying really hard and they haven't quite figured it out yet, which doesn't make me feel very confident. The third mention that I wanted, the third thing I wanted to talk about is I'm concerned about the CEQA law that and which has also already been raised, that this, and it's what Claudia, is that her name, the woman who spoke first, raised that concern that we're expected to vote on something which it clearly is going to affect the environment, and there is clearly not established science that says that this plan would be would not affect the environment. I'm very concerned. Water. Oh, that's all. I'm going to say one more thing, and that is I'm very concerned about the urban forest in Chico if our groundwater disappears below the roots of the valley oak trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Gina Hall.
Good morning, commissioners. My name is Gina Trope Hall, and I am here as a concerned citizen with the intent to understand the proposed Tuscan Water District more intimately. And I've found that after surveying my peers, that almost all of them know nothing about the Tuscan Water District. And these are informed folks. But it's not shocking because there really hasn't been a wide net of public discourse with regard to the Tuscan Water District. And as far as I can see, there's only a small demographic discussing it. And that is disturbing because not only does it affect the Tuscan Water District folks within the parameter, but also people like me who depend on the groundwater, the 120,000 people who depend on the groundwater. And then you will decide the fate on that. So I'd like to move on in effort to further my research. The reason why I'm really up here today is to find out where I can access the financials of the Tuscan Water District campaign costs. And I'm specifically interested in documentation regarding expenses incurred by or on behalf of Butte LAFCo, time and materials, time cards, documents provided to and from any agent or agents of the Tuscan Water District, such as statements, invoices, billings, payments, and checks. So that is it. I appreciate your time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucas, as far as her trying to understand it, LAFCo has held numerous public hearings with notices in the papers and individual notices sent to landowners within the area. Is that correct?
All correct.
And then where can she access those finances for any public documentation from LAFCO? That would be through you. Is that correct?
Correct. And she has made that outreach and I will respond to her and we
Okay.
will provide those documents.
Thank you. Next speaker card I have is for Richard Harriman.
Commission. I'm Richard Harriman. I'm an attorney here in Chico. I have been asked to appear on behalf of a coalition of property owners of small parcels located in the proposed Tuscan Water District. Property owners who have domestic water wells in the proposed district and domestic and agricultural landowners in the proposed district whose wells have failed and have been deepened repaired and or replaced due to the overdrafting of the Tuscan aquifer. I've also been asked to appear in the public interest by other residents of the city of Chico and customers of California Water Service Company. I'm a resident of Chico. I'm a property owner. I'm a taxpayer and a voter in Butte County. I'm going to tear off a question that was raised by Commissioner McGrean because I think it gets to the focus right away. Commissioner McGrean raised a question regarding potential conflicts of interest of the incoming board members who've been working with the AGUBC and spending funds and so on and so forth. One of the ways that could be used to finance the agency would be to secure loans from people. Mr. Lucas referred to potential donations, but loans could be given by board members. And if they did, they would have a conflict of interest in sitting and voting on them. So there's an inherent conflict of interest in terms of all of the board members who worked with the AGUBC. So that leads to the second question, which is in Mr. Lucas's fiscal analysis and nowhere else in the record that I can find, is there a disclosure by those who are forming and the applicants for this particular approval is how much they have spent. What have their costs been to prosecute this proceeding? And nowhere has there been any disclosure of the political expenditures made by AGUBC members and applicants for this proceeding. So the point that I think has to be addressed in this resolution and amended at the very least is what is the actual amount of costs and political expenditures that were made by these applicants. And the reason I cite this for you is that in the Monroeville district in Glenn County, all of those costs and expenditures were recovered from a payment by the new entity. Therefore, I think absent those disclosures in this process and in this by amendment to this resolution, you cannot conduct a lawful election that will comply with due process requirements. You need to have the full disclosure of the costs that are going to be a debt or an obligation of this entity right now, when they're elected, when the board members come on, they're going to have that debt. It needs to be disclosed before we even proceed with the election. It has to be. So I ask that you include my request as an amendment to your resolution if you're going to adopt it. Otherwise, I think you have an invalid resolution. Thank you for the opportunity to that you'd like to ask.
No,
Thank you, Mr. Betts.
thank you. Can we have Scott address that if he's still there?
Mr. Brown,
Yes, I'm still here.
did you hear that comment from Mr. Harriman?
Yes, I did. Certainly if there is, once the new board is formed, it has to decide how it's going to fund its operations on an interim basis. But there's no obligation, legal obligation on that board to repay any of the proponent's expenses. Those proponent expenses are not an obligation of the district. Now, the district may, after formation of the board, may determine to borrow money from some source, in which case that will be a legal obligation of the district to repay. But that will be fully disclosed in the public meeting and decision-making of that board of directors. But there's no hidden obligation out there now. The board doesn't have to pay a dime to any of these proponents unless the board decides to do so after it is formed. So there is no hidden obligation at the present time.
The next card I have is for Bill Bynum.
Yeah, okay. Thank you for giving me this time to speak. I hadn't planned on speaking, but I've been paying attention and following along. And I've been paying attention for quite a while, over a year, with the proceedings. I a resident of Oroville. I serve on the Wyandotte Creek Groundwater Sustainability Agency. So I do have some interest in this. It seems to me whether this is constitutional or not, it's not democratic. It's obvious to me that if a handful of wealthy landowners, some of them from out of the area, obviously out of the area, have spent a lot of money. And bluntly, I see it as a power grab, a water grab from big moneyed interests. They're the ones who are funding it. And whether or not you want to acknowledge it or not, they're just moving in with muscle. They took over the Rock Creek GSA. That was public knowledge. And now they're going to usurp the Vina GSA by forming their own and have carte blanche to basically do what they want. I just think this is undemocratic. And I think it's taken away from the GSAs that are statewide organization. They should be allowed to do their job. You are on the verge of handing over, I think, a lot of public water, and I would urge you not to do that. Thanks.
Thank you.
So
Is there any-
can I ask a question? That's exactly why we set the board up the way we did. So that we didn't have what they call powerful grabs of people outside. This board is made up of 9 people that's going to be distributed amongst the owners, landowners and everything else. And nothing can happen without that board approving it. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Am I missing something there?
I do not believe so.
Thank you.
You haven't elected the board yet.
Yeah, that was my next thing. Is there any other members of the public wishing to speak?
Board of Directors, it's nice to be with you here again today. Thank you for your attention to this matter. My name's Darren Rice. I'm one of the proponents. I'm a small farmer. Been through this process starting 5 years ago when SGMA was passed and adopted by the state of California. And I feel like this is the most democratic way for everybody to get involved. Everybody will have a vote. There won't be any hidden agendas. There'll be a board picked by 9 different areas. So there's no way to load this up. As people are thinking, there's nothing scary about it. The vast majority, 90+% of the state of California is run by water districts, and they run very well. And they're overseen by voluminous laws and regulations that that a few of us understand. And you guys, I mean, your book's big. It would take a long time to understand everything in there. This does give everybody involved and it touched by groundwater and people that need to be on, or excuse me, it does allow people who are their only source of groundwater an opportunity to participate in this SGMA thing. There's no water grab, there's no water rights. The Vina GSA that we're going to be connected with has got all the power. We're just landowners that want to work within the boundaries of SGMA and with the people that are participating in the SGMA process here locally. And we hope that you give us a chance to be involved in this process and continue to have a healthy aquifer that we can all enjoy and keep everything local here. There's no other plan than to be sustainable and continue to farm and do what we love to do and feed the world. Thank you for your time, gentlemen, ladies. Thank you.
Yeah.
Commission members, John Scott. I'm a Butte County well water user. I'm on a deep well. I just want to say that I think it's really not in the best interest of Butte County for LAFCo to have a meeting trying to get the consensus of all the people on the Tuscan Water District and have it 20 miles away from the people who would show up in Chico. This meeting should be in Chico and you'd have 1,000 people there that are really upset about this. So please don't approve this. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I have one more card from Terry, and I apologize. I'm not going to be able to pronounce your name.
Do you want to say anything? Okay.
Good morning. My name is Tovi Giesentanner, and I'm here representing the petitioners for the Tuscan Water District. We appreciate your time yet again. We had hoped not to have to come back to you and take more of your staff's time. But unfortunately, there was a procedural problem with the election process the last time. When we became aware that there just really wasn't any other solution but to essentially go back through another election. And once that decision was made, that created procedural issues for the resolution that had been adopted last time. So that's why we're back. As Steve mentioned, we did take that opportunity, and we got some good constructive feedback from a couple of folks. And we took that opportunity to incorporate that feedback as well, to try to create the strongest possible resolution on the one that's most legally supported. So that's why we're back here today. At the last hearing, what I've handed to you is a map, and the green on the map shows folks who have petitioned. So that's acreage within the district that's petitioned for this water district. The other side of that page is a list of not only petitioners, but other individuals that we've received letters of support from over the past 2 to 3 years. Last February, we had 40, 50 or so farmers here, and they offered public comment. We also had some interested citizens that had been following the process. I mean, this was in front of the Water Commission, the Board of Supervisors. There were a number of opportunities for people to participate, and we did get and so there were interested citizens here who had participated in that process and who had kind of at the very end decided that this was a benefit to the region and to move forward with this. We also Jane Dolan also came up and spoke. So that's another person that's represented a large portion of this proposed district for 30 plus years. Somebody that we look to with a lot of respect. The point I'm making is that there's broad-based bipartisan support for this effort. And I just didn't want that to be lost today as we're talking this through. So I'll just quickly go back. During Steve's comments, he said, look, it's an imperfect process, but it's the one the state gave us. It is an imperfect process. We agree. But we've tried to put together and come back and create as much public process to create a resolution that's in its strongest form for you to adopt. I think I'm on yellow, so I'm going to just go to the request. Our request today is that you approve as staff has recommended. And if you're unclear or if you still have questions, there was a lot of information presented today, but if you are unclear on anything or still have questions, our respectful request would be that you continue the item as opposed to denying the item. So that's the request for today, is approve it. And if you still have questions that you further discuss or further understand, then to continue and not to just oppose. So with that, I'll stop.
Can I
Thank you.
ask Mr. Giesentanner a question? Becky.
Please.
So on the, excuse me, on this material you distributed, you said 1,000 landowners petitions representing 660 parcels. It's
Yeah.
my understanding now, though, that this process includes way more parcels, right? Because now we're including everyone with an assessed land value. Is that correct?
The district contains about 3,100, just over 3,100 parcels.
Okay.
All right. So of the 3,100 parcels, 660 of those parcels submitted, and which represents about 1,000 land ownership interests, because some of those parcels are owned by multiple interests. So there's about 660 parcels that submitted petitions within the 3,100 parcels in the district. I mean, there's a ton. There's about 24.
I'm sorry, and perhaps I misunderstood what Mr. Lucas was saying earlier, but that when it went from the 1 acre to the assessed value, the dollar per, that then included,
Sorry, could you say that again?
Sorry.
I'll repeat that if you like. So my understanding is that it now includes a whole larger swath of individuals who live in the area than previously.
Real quick clarification, if
Okay,
I might,
thank you.
before Mr. Giesentiner goes on, is, so we did not change the boundary. The boundary is not changing. The parcels count is exactly the same. The only thing we're changing is that with respect to those parcels, their voting right now is linked to their assessed land value and not to the size, the acres of their parcel. Everybody's the same. All parcels are the same. It's just the voting mechanism that has changed. Is that more clear? Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
But that's okay. Steve does a better job answering anyways. Okay, any additional questions? Okay, thank you. Rich, did you want to say anything? Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
Come back up, please.
Excuse me. My name is Pam Stoser. I wasn't planning on saying anything, but I just want to express my support for what the gentleman said behind here about this meeting being closer to the people that are affected. I think if this meeting was in Chico, you would see a lot of interest from a lot of regular people. And also the other thing is water is a public entity, and handing over the rights to our public entity, our water resource, to a private organization is not right. And I urge you not to do it. Thank you.
Is there anyone else from the public wishing to comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and confine discussion to the commissioners. Do you have any questions?
Mr.
comments?
Chair? If I might, I want to just throw out two small, as you discuss this, there's two clerical errors in the resolution that I just want to point out, should somebody end up making a motion. On the second page of the resolution, which is attachment A, at the bottom, it says, starts with now therefore. That first draft resolution number 11, that should read 18. So that'll be a change. That was just a clerical error. And again, the other change is on the very last page of the resolution under F1, it says Butte County Local Agency Formation Commission. I just want to strike the word county. That's not a part of our official title. So those are my two changes. Strike the word county in F1 and change 11 to 18 in the page 2 of the resolution.
Thank you. Shares or comments or questions?
No one else has. So I'm not sure if this is a question for the attorney who's on the line. I always prefer to err on the side of caution with these things. So my understanding from the reading of the materials, and again, I didn't have a lot of time, was that a new resolution was required. But we're putting forth an amended resolution, and I want to be clear. I know that whenever I deal with any state or any elected body, there is a big difference between a new resolution and an amended resolution, and frequently things come back if we don't have the correct resolution that is required by statute. And so I'm curious as to why we are allowed to submit an amended resolution when it requires a new resolution. So I don't know if that's a question or an attorney question.
I think I'll answer that. So it's semantics, amended, new. So what we're doing is we're adopting a new resolution. It's going to supersede the original resolution. So that's why you see everything that's in the original resolution is duplicated again in resolution number 18, which is in front of you today, with the addition of the amendments that we made, thus the amended resolution part of the language. But at the end of the day, should this all proceed forward and ultimately be approved, resolution 18 that you're adopting today will become the guiding resolution for this process. It is replacing 11. It's cleaner in the long run, multi generations down the road when people look through files to see one resolution, not an amended resolution, and that causes concern. So we will be replacing 11 with 18, which is what you're doing today. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I mean, we have it listed as an amended resolution though. And so,
The term amended was to indicate that resolution was amended from the previous resolution. If Mr. Brown, do you have anything else you would like to add to that?
No, this is a new resolution amending the previous resolution.
Is there a paragraph or sentence in there in the resolution that specifically states that? I didn't see that, but I could have missed it.
If you read through the resolution, it cites all of the previous actions, including the first resolution, and then concluding with the now therefore adopting draft resolution number 182223, amending and restating resolution number 11. So it's in the preface and it's also in the finding.
So it's clear.
I believe so.
Any other questions or comments from the commission? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the statutory exemptions identified by draft resolution number 18, attachment A, as the environmental determination pursuant to CEQA, and approve amendments identified by draft resolution 18, 2223, attachment A, conditionally approving the formation of the Tuscan Water District.
I'll second that. With your changes.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a second.
We will need a roll call vote.
Yeah, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Ritter,
nay.
Commissioner Bolin.
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson,
Aye.
Chair Betts,
Yes.
Commissioner McGreehan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Thank you.
That item passes 5-1. You're welcome to return now, Mr. Connolly.
Went down the rabbit hole there, short reels.
And just as a reminder, you've already gone through the remainder of the agenda previously.
Okay, thanks everyone for your attendance today. We really appreciate your input. Moving on, class dismissed.
Yeah.
We're gonna meet back here Thursday, April 6th at 9 a.m. Yeah.
Thank you.
There you go.